In this lesson, we are going to talk about the nerve pathway. In other words, how nerve conduct information through the body. Now, what exactly is a nerve? A nerve is a bundle of axons from many neurons wrapped together with connective tissue. This nerve acts as the body's wiring system, carrying electrical signals between the brain, the spinal cord, and the rest of the body. To understand the nerve pathway, we'll need to break it down into 1. The anatomy of a neuron, which is the building block of nerves. 2. The organization of nerves. 3. The physiology of nerve signaling, which is how impulse travel. 4. Reflex pathway as an example of how signals flow. And 5. Clinical relevance. So let's start with the anatomy of a neuron. The neuron is the fundamental unit of the nervous system. Each neuron has specialized parts that allow it to send and receive messages. It has the cell body, the dendrites, the axons, the axon terminal, and myelin sheaths. The cell body contains the nucleus and the organelles. It integrates incoming signals, while the dendrites are branch-like extensions that receive signals from other neurons. Then the axons are a long projection that transmits impulses away from the cell body. Then the axon terminals, also called the synaptic knobs, they are the end points where neurotransmitters are released. Then the myelin sheaths are a fatty covering around the axons that increase the speed of conduction. It is formed by Schwann cells in the peripheral nervous system and the oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system. We also have the node of Revia, which is the gap between the myelin segments where ion exchange occurs during nerve conduction. So the nerve pathway begins with a single neuron and thousands of axons combine to form a nerve. Now that takes us to structure of a nerve. Nerves themselves are not just axons. They are organized bundles of protective layers. It has the endoneuron, the perineuron, and epineuron. The endoneuron surrounds individual axons. The perineuron wraps groups of axons into fascicles, while the epineuron are the outermost layer that encloses the whole nerve. Now, nerve can be classified as sensory nerve, motor nerve, and mixed nerve. Sensory nerve carries signals to the central nervous system, which is the CNS, while the motor nerve carries signals from the CNS to the muscle or the glands. Then, the mixed nerve contains both the sensory and the motor fibers, and most nerves in the body fall into this category. Now, let's talk about the physiology of nerve pathway. Nerve pathway is essentially the journey of an electrical impulse called an action potential. So let's start with step 1. Neurons maintains a negative charge inside relative to the outside, about negative 70 millivolts. This is maintained by the sodium-potassium pump, which pumps 3 sodium ions out and 2 potassium in, and also by leaky ion channels. Step 2. Stimulation. A stimulus like light, touch, sound, or neurotransmitter release changes the electrical balance. If the charge reaches a threshold, usually around negative 55 millivolts, the neuron fires an action potential. Step 3. Depolarization. Voltage-gated sodium channels open, while sodium ions rush inside. The membrane potential spikes to around positive 30 millivolts. Step 4. Repolarization. When sodium channels close, potassium channels open. Potassium ions then flows out, restoring the negative charge inside. Step 5. Hyperpolarization. Sometimes the inside becomes slightly more negative than usual before stabilizing again to negative 70 millivolts. Now, this entire cycle from depolarization to repolarization is called action potential. Now, step 6 is the saltatory conduction. In myelin axon, the action potential doesn't travel smoothly along the axon. Instead, it jumps from the node of Revia to the next. This is called saltatory conduction, and it makes nerve transmission extremely fast. Step 7, synaptic transmission. When the action potential reaches the axon terminal, it triggers the release of neurotransmitters such as acetylcholine, dopamine, and serotonin. These chemicals cross the synaptic cleft and binds to receptors on the next cell, which may be another neuron, a muscle, or a gland. This is how information is passed forward along the nerve pathway. Now that takes us to number 4, which is reflex pathway. So we're going to take an example. To better understand nerve pathways, let's look at a reflex arc, which is one of the simplest and fastest nerve circuits. When you accidentally touch a hot object, here is what actually happens. Number 1, the sensory receptors in the skin detect the heat. Then the sensory neurons carries the signals to the spinal cord. Then the interneuron in the spinal cord processes the information. Then the motor neuron carries the command back to the muscle. And then finally the effector muscle contracts, pulling your hand away from the hot object. Now notice something important. The reflex action happens without the brain's involvement at first, which is why it is so fast. So the brain only receives the signal afterward, making you feel or aware of the pain. This shows how nerve pathway can be simple in terms of reflex arc or complex in terms of thinking, memory, and voluntary movement. Now let's talk about the clinical relevance of nerve pathways. Understanding nerve pathways is important in medicine because many diseases affect them. Example, multiple sclerosis, also called MS, is a disease where the myelin sheath is destroyed, slowing or blocking nerve conduction. We also have the peripheral neuropathy, which is a damage to the peripheral nerve, often due to diabetes, causing pain, tingling, or weakness. Then the spinal cord injuries can disrupt nerve pathways, leading to paralysis or loss of sensation. You also have stroke, which interrupts pathway in the brain, leading to loss of motor and sensory function. So in summary, the nerve are bundles of axons protected by connective tissue. Each neuron has a cell body, dendrite, axon, terminals, and terminals that transmit electrical signals. The physiology of the nerve conduction is based on action potential, which is a rapid electrical change across the membrane. So the nerve pathway is essentially the communication highway of the body, linking the brain, the spinal cord, and every organ, muscle, and glands. Without it, no sensation, movement, or thought would be possible. So there you have it, the anatomy and physiology of the nerve pathway. Until next time, bye.